Fracking. So, who's going to start? Tina, would you like to start?
I wasn't actually putting my hand up. Okay. Hi, I'm Tina Rothery. I'm one of the Lancashire Nanas. And it's such an honour to be here because I can see everybody that I respect and love in other movements that we would be supporting if we weren't so consumed by this. But this takes every moment of every day, and certainly for the last 450 plus days, we haven't really been able to leave Lancashire very much. It's quite nice just to be out, really, and away from the side of a road. So it's just an honour to be here. I think I wasn't quite sure how long you wanted me to do. I was just...
A couple of minutes.
Thank you. Oh, okay. So I suppose one of the things to say is why are there such a thing as a Lancashire Nana? And I think Bex explained it quite well, is that we needed to stop having a headline like when we were in the news that said, you know, environmental warrior, you know, environmental campaigner, eco something, whatever. And because that was telling you what we were doing, but not why we were doing it. And we really needed the message to be that I'm not standing there just because I care about the planet, because I care about the planet because I have a grandchild. And I have children in my family who I love and adore. And I need to know that we have provided ample clean air, water, and growing soil for them for the future. So rather than this big, slightly less personal, let's save the planet, it's let's save our families. And that resonated when we said nanas. We did also notice a little quirk with that, which was we occupied a field in 2014. Now, I've occupied other things, but never quite got the reception we got when we occupied the field. Was we were wearing pretty little yellow tabards, little headscarves, and the police came and they went, oh, hello. Like, really? All it took was a headscarf. And they were really... It was a different relationship, and people related to us very differently. And that was it. And I think Barbara mentioned it at the end. It's about bringing that, the humans that we are. We're not just activists and protesters and something that you can just write off that's cold and isolated. You can just throw us aside and discount us. We're you, we're your neighbours, we're your mothers, your grandmothers. We're everyone in society who is standing up with this obligation to protect our next generation. So that was how we became nanas. And also, I think, because you've seen the big, brave, bold actions, but not everyone can do that. Anne is 86. She's not going to jump on a truck. But there's no one walks slower than an 86-year-old with a stick. And maybe that slow walks a truck. And it was finding those avenues for every person in society not to be an activist, but to draw out the activist in them, to draw out some way that they could be active against something that was clearly upsetting them. But, you know, when if you sit at home and you're 86 and you're like, oh, my God, what will I do? How will we save ourselves? You would feel guilt and remorse, whereas now we found an indoor for everybody. You walk slowly, walk in front of a truck, you know. You bake cakes, bring cakes. You know, there's a role for everyone in this. And I think it's a matter of everyone in society standing up. So thank you for the opportunity.
Joe.
Hi, hello, I'm Joe Corré. What can I say? I don't know. I first looked at this issue of fracking when Balcombe was under threat of being drilled. I was invited down there by a guy called Jamie, who was in this film. And then after that time, started to look at this issue in more detail and decided then, 6 years ago, there was one thing that I was determined to do. It was to stop this industry. And I can't wait till it's over. Like my life back.
Yes.
But I think 6 years on, we find ourselves in a very different place. We find ourselves as a country now surrounded by other countries that have either banned it or have moratoriums in place. When we started 5-6 years ago, there were a handful of reports on this issue that undermined the sort of fabricated government reports. Today there are thousands of reports about it. And we also find that the major political parties, now we have the Conservatives that are isolated as the only party that support this industry. It's taken a while, and I would say too long, for the Labour Party to get behind it and say they were going to ban it. Too much internal influence from the GMB union and jobs for pipe fitters. And so in some ways we're in a good place, but we're also at this kind of point of desperation from the industry, because I think they can see the writing on the wall, the investment and bubble that they invented in this dash for gas under Osborne and everything is now looking like a real wet fart, not a financial investment bubble at all. Nobody's really made any money out of it. And the investors want their money back. We have a problem with INEOS because unlike the other companies, INEOS want to use the gas themselves, the methane to power their plant and the ethane to turn into ethylene, to make polyethylene, plastic, more plastic from it. So the whole argument that we've heard for the last 5-6 years about keeping the lights on, this pathetic idea that we're going to, protect ourselves from Putin's gas or something, the idea that it's a bridge to a renewable future, blah, 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 blah. The major fracking company in the UK now, their cards are on the table, and it's because they want to make more plastic. Thankfully, and I think David Attenborough has a lot to be thankful. We are now looking at really starting a bit more of a serious war on plastic. So these two things are kind of coming together at a point where it feels like we're winning, but at the same time, too early to say that, because these companies are very powerful and they are desperate, and that's also the case with INEOS and this ridiculous draconian injunction, the most draconian injunction in British legal history that we're now fighting. Sorry?
Other than the UCOG injunction.
Well, yeah. So that is something that I started fighting and will continue to fight in the Court of Appeal and stuff, and that's what's going on really. Anyway, I'll pass on to someone else.
Thank you, Anna from Reclaim the Power.
Hi, I'm Anna from Reclaim the Power. There's quite a few of us here tonight, I think, and I just wanted to start by saying to Tina, who's kind of here from the local community, that it was an absolute pleasure to spend the summer with you. We had a really incredible time, and as I said in the film, Reclaim the Power is a network of people from around the UK who are experienced in direct action, and we try to use our skills and experience and creativity to bolster frontline communities who are campaigning against something that affects them. And we do that partially in solidarity with those communities because we really want to be there for them, but also because the things that those communities are fighting against in their local areas also have really significant impacts elsewhere in terms of climate change and climate injustice, and also social and economic injustice around the world, and that the people that are most affected by those injustices are the people that are least responsible for causing them. And so being able to be there with the community in Lancashire over the summer fighting what was one fracking site is actually part of a much wider narrative about challenging climate injustice in the energy system in the UK, and reclaiming the energy infrastructure for what we want it to be. And I think something that's really beautiful and amazing is that I've known Tina for a number of years now, and as you said, like, you're first and foremost a grandmother, but I think that you, along with so many people around the UK, have been integral into the anti-fracking movement, but are like moving beyond just being anti-fracking and a part of a network of people that have been radicalised by this fight. Yes. I mean, I've been radicalised by this fight. When I was at school, I once didn't have my homework in and got told off and I cried, and now I've got a criminal record because of fracking. So it's like, it's just a thing that makes people that would normally never stand up for something come together and not only stand against something but stand for something. Yeah. And it's people that are becoming part of a wider narrative about saying, okay, let's not just talk about what we don't want, let's talk about what we do want and how we build that together and be part of what I think is the most people-powered movement I've ever experienced. And I think the thing that's, and fracking is terrifying, but for me it's also really exciting because it's brought together all these incredible personalities and spirits and just wonderful personalities that have all clubbed together in a way that I never thought was possible, and we are all really fighting together for a much safer, fairer future, not just for people in the UK, but for people around the world that are affected by climate change and all the injustices that come as a result of that. So thank you for everything you've done, Tina. You're amazing.
Thank you for completely messing my head up now. So, if I'm allowed to respond, because I can't take something that beautiful and not respond, is that there's, I think it was said in there that, you said that we could be in a pub and we just sat at different tables all our lives. And it was the fact that we all changed tables and that, we sit in circles with people and there are no social indicators. And I don't care. I don't care where you came from, what you did before, whether you have a home or a job. I don't care about anything. I care that your heart acts in the same way my heart acts. And that's what draws us together. And that's the activist in us being drawn out, not a bunch of activists coming together. That's us being drawn together. And I think that as much as activism has radicalized at least 26 grandmas, I think 26 grandmas slightly radicalized activism too. And I think, not just the grandmas, I just mean the diversity of us, that we infused ourselves with a different way and different approach. So thank you.
Lorraine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Lorraine. I'm from Frack Off London and World Action Group. And thanks to Zoe and Paul for such a great film. I was at the protest camp for 3 months at Balcombe. And I think that the reason why it was flagship for down south is that at that time we were allowed to call it fracking here in the south. We're not allowed to call that here. Since the Infrastructure Act of 2015, we have a really hard time trying to campaign against the oil and gas industry because of the definitions that they've put in place. We can just call it advanced well stimulation techniques. Exactly. It's rather difficult to, you do pick up this leaflet and it will explain the reason why we are being hoodwinked in the south. We're also facing an injunction like what Joe has challenged with INEOS. We have got the 2-penny bit share company, UK Oil and Gas, which operates 3 sites, using very similar draconian techniques of trying to close us down to the point of actually saying that we are not allowed to go about lawful activities like taking photographs, like standing outside a drill site, like lobbying the supply chain, which you can see is so effective. Most of these people that supply the chain, to supply the industry, don't even realise what they're actually supplying. They're third parties. And UK Oil and Gas are trying to close us down and even lobbying that. So, yeah, it's a tough fight. But one of the things that what this industry, and I echo everyone, what this industry does to us is it makes our community stronger. The fact that UK Oil and Gas have brought this injunction against us, we have come together so rapidly, so strong. It's incredible. And the community and the unity is beautiful. And yeah, we will stop this. We will resist this and we will stop this.
And last but not least, Paul, would you like to introduce?
Hello, I'm Paul Mobbs. I was radicalised by an MOD policeman trying to kick my kidneys in 1983. I was involved in peace movement, GMOs, roads. I've been there, done it. But what my particular thing is, I'm into data. I do lots and lots of data. Somebody has to read all the bullshit that these people put out and poke fun at it, and that's unfortunately my job. However, I haven't really, my head hasn't been in fracking for a year. I've moved on. The reason is that I started in 2009. I found out about the licenses in 2008 and thought, what the hell are they applying for oil and gas licenses there? There's nothing there. And then in 2009, Theo Colborne, who's a toxicologist in America, sent me all her data about fracking. We've been involved on incinerators together. And she sent me all her new stuff about fracking, and I saw this stuff and saw the 13th round licenses and thought, so if you Google, you'll find my stuff from 2010, going around the country, talking to community groups about what was coming. That's what I do. That's also why I've now moved on. I'm now working on the next stuff, which is coming in the next couple of years, some of which is, I won't tell you about it, it'll just spoil your evening. But what I will say is, I was out today making a film, which hopefully will be out in a couple of weeks. I was in Parliament Square, where I've been many times before, and I was just stood in the middle with my tripod, trying to get a nice sweeping shot of the 4 elements of the British state. And I was turfed off by the wardens, because now, apparently, you are not allowed to linger on Parliament Green, and you are not allowed to put a tripod on there. Now, our government is petrified of the public. That doesn't make them susceptible to reason, that makes them dangerous. We are living in a very different state to where we were 18 months ago. We are in the middle of a slow-motion coup. Now, if you think it's weird now, come next March. See, I've spent 30-odd years, ever since I left engineering, I spent 30-odd years hacking the regulatory system to make it do things it wasn't really meant to do, but you can get away with it. So I have got all these regulations in my head, and when they disappear next March, you have no concept of the bullshit they are going to try and force down our throats. Now, I will say, little criticism. I didn't hear enough of the word social licence in that film. And I've just had to write a response to the Communities Committee request about evidence on planning and fracking. And I've had to say, it doesn't matter what you put in the planning system about fracking, it doesn't have social licence. It's not just fracking. We haven't seen it in the news, but they now have 30 to 50 police a day, plus up to 30 contractors to cut down 2 or 3 trees per day in Sheffield.
Yeah.
It does not have social licence. Why don't we hear about this? There is so much that is going on. You do not hear about it. Because, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. After next March, stuff you thought was just sacrosanct will suddenly be open game. It will be open field season on anything environmental. A bit like George said in the film. You know, economy is digging stuff up, building stuff, messing stuff up, making a mess. That is Brexit. That is what they want it to be. And it doesn't matter if you're for or against Brexit. With your experience with fracking or trees in Sheffield or whatever, do you trust this government? That's what it comes down to.
So I think now we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So who's going to ask the first question? Could people hold the mic right up to their mouth so that we can all hear your questions? If you can introduce yourself and just say if you're part of any group and things as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm Al. I've also helped with the Reclaim the Power thing last summer and also with another group called Rising Up. I've got a question probably for Paul Mobbs, but if anyone else wants to have a go at it, then feel free. What we didn't hear about in this film was perhaps the way that fracking and nuclear might be intertwined in the future government energy strategy. And at Preston New Road, you've got 5 miles away, Springfield's nuclear site, which was the first nuclear site in this country, where they make their nuclear fuel rods and do some waste reprocessing. And we would like to hear their thoughts on that, especially as there was an earthquake in the area in 2011, and how that earthquakes or the water pollution and things like that might affect the nuclear waste issue and it being close to a nuclear site.
Right. I might disappoint you here. There was a very old consultation paper on getting rid of intermediate level radioactive waste down boreholes. And somebody saw that and somebody saw fracking and got the two mixed up. You would not bury nuclear waste in a fracking hole because it's the completely opposite environment to what you want to bury nuclear waste in. Full stop, end of story. However, there is a major nuclear issue with fracking, and that's the norm, the naturally occurring radioactive materials. There was a paper came out a few years ago saying the radioactive risk from fracking is nothing because, look, we've got these springs in Italy where people go bathing that have got loads more radioactivity in from ordinary stuff than fracking produces. However, if you went to those springs, you would exceed your annual dose limit in about a day, because it's extremely radioactive. Most of that is radium, and funny enough, that's mostly what comes out of fracking holes in terms of the radiological risk. So nuclear waste, fracking, completely separate, very separate industries. Nuclear industry, I could go on for hours about. I won't. Very boring. But waste is the Achilles heel of the fracking industry. We do not have the capacity to treat it. What you do when you treat it, you take all this mixed up goo, you basically strain the lumps out to produce clean water, and you have all the lumps left. What do you do with it? It's mud, it's earth, it's bits of rock. You can't get rid of it. So you have to have somewhere to bury it. So they're going to have lots more hazardous waste sites. Now, the reason I was able to go to Lancashire in 2010 and 2011 was I knew the communities already, because I've been up there working on their hazardous waste sites since 1992. There are quite a few hazardous waste sites in West Lancashire and the Fylde, because it's all come out of Liverpool and Manchester and been buried there. But they're going to need far more if we have a fully fledged fracking industry. And nobody's talking about this. Where's the waste going to go? And I brought it up in 2011 with DEC. I did a big tome in 2014 when they consulted about the licences then. I keep bringing it up. I keep writing to parliamentary committees about it. Nobody wants to take this issue on because it's this idea of the market. The market will solve the problem. Yeah, market can't make stuff dematerialise. That's the basic problem with the market. So waste is going to be the issue, radioactive or otherwise.
Got another question over here. Hiya, Danny from Reclaim the Power. Firstly, thank you to Zoe and Paul for that really, really amazing film. It's really brilliant, and Seb's mum made me cry all over again. She's so great. So maybe this is jumping the gun a bit, but that's a really great film, and there's really great plans with the locals to do United Resistance, which is a rerun of July for the next 3 months in the lead up. And we've got big plans in the summer as Reclaim the Power to go back to Lancashire and stage that again. This would be a great mobiliser tool to take around communities and be like, hey guys, this, now, next. What are the next plans for this film, and how can we use it, and where will it go, and is there a plan yet? Because we would love to do that.
Do you want to answer that, Erica?
Sure. Sorry. So the film will be available on Lush Player, player.lush.com from tomorrow. I don't know, Zoe and Paul, if you have any plans to do a tour, but the film will be available on Lush Player for free for people to view from tomorrow onwards.
And we're very much hoping to tour around the UK, especially to potential site areas and wherever we're asked basically to show the film and create other Q&As and discussion groups around that. So do let us know if you want it screened near you.
Hi, Alice. So I would like to know, how does it come that fracking is not banished in the UK? You were saying that it is banished in so many other countries, like Germany. I'm not sure about France.
Yes. Yep.
So how does it come? So I have. Does it have to do because you have such big companies that are so powerful, but then they have it also in Germany, or does it have to do maybe with a mentality, British mentality, that about being a little bit having fear about criticism? I mean, I'm German, and if we're critical, we've been called rude. So do you think it would be, it has something to do with the mentality?
Can I just say, I think it has everything to do with the lack of democracy. You know, the fact that the lobbyists have more access to government than we do. That we, the people, do not have a voice. We discovered that what we did for the first few years was we chose every available lawful means to protest, to get our voices heard. We objected at planning. We put in more objections to planning than they'd ever received. We took the route where we lobbied our MPs. We informed our councillors. We went through everything we could do that was lawful and available to do, and we won. And we got it stopped in Lancashire. And then the government just said that doesn't matter at all. And what that set was a precedent, because our council spent over £75,000 doing a long 18 months of investigation into that planning. And they exhausted all their councillors and all their resources, and they came to the right conclusion that we should say no. And then when the government said, that doesn't matter, Lancashire can't make that decision, we will make it for you, what that told every council in our country was, you going to spend that money? Are you going to spend that money and that time and exhaust your councillors to truly look into this planning? Because you know what, even if you say no, we have the ability just to overturn you. And just to make Lancashire's case, we are nearly bankrupt as a council. Within the next 3 years, our council won't have hardly any money left, and the government has reduced what it's giving to the council. But here's the trick, is they can keep some of their business rates, but they can keep more of them as fracking. So when we haven't got the money to repair our roads or improve our schools and hospitals, that's okay. If we take fracking, we'll be all right. So, you know, if you can just take it, you can get all that extra money. And if you don't, well, you're just going to have to wear the consequences. You've blown your 75 grand. You've blown your police budget by tons. We've all just had a rise in our council tax to cope with the policing costs. And they've made it very clear it's down to the policing costs. So, you know, that's turning the community against, you know, what we're doing as well. So, yeah, no democracy.
Does anyone else have a reply to that?
I'd just like to draw the Infrastructure Act that I referred to earlier on, which redefined fracking. When that legislation has been drilled back, that's come from European legislation, and it was industry influence to set the quantities of water that we use within, like it's defined as fracking, is so high. So, yeah, there's such a lack of democracy. I mean, the Infrastructure Act was battled against so heavily. We had Labour Party put in 20 amendments to that. It went into the House of Lords and got thrown back even worse than what it went in. Yeah. You know, they've lobbied so hard, the industry, to government. Like, they are hell-bent on pushing the oil and gas industry here in the UK. And, you know, as Tina and I were speaking earlier on, it just seems to be, hopefully, and, you know, they're looking at this as a lost cause. But, yeah, it is incredible how we are in a country where it is banned everywhere around us. Yet they still want to push this agenda through. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah.
Why is Britain a home-owning democracy? Why is the goal to own a home? There was a huge misinformation a couple of weeks ago that it was 100 years since women got the vote, over 30 years old. Not true. Women over 30 with property got the vote. Mm-hmm. They dropped that bit. We didn't get full equality until 1935, as in no property required. Now, if you go back throughout history, all the way, you know, all the people who made our modern parliament, every one of them was a huge landowner. In this country, 75% of the people adults have an interest in land. They have a lease or a mortgage on a house they can't possibly afford, whatever, but they have an interest in land. 75% of the land area is owned by 1% of the people. We are the most concentrated land ownership in Europe. That is the underlying issue here. Now, if you go down to St Mary's Putney, very expensive cafe, but go in the church, and it's the church where in 1647 the Levellers debated the future of Britain. And they sort of won the argument, but they lost because they were hanged and harried and whatever. But there's a lovely quote on the wall that it's a quote from Thomas Rainsborough. The lowest he in Britain, in England, has a life to live as great as the greatest he. And what that was an argument was about was Lord Fairfax said the only people who get to vote in this country are people with land. And if you look at the whole history of our country, it's about controlling land, resources. It's about private property. That's what we share with America. It's all about private property. There is no recognition of public good. And until we get that recognition of public good, that there are things we hold in commonality, which is what the debate was in 1647, that there are commonalities. Luddites weren't against technology. They were against technological developments which offended commonality. That is, they put people out of work, degraded their conditions, and made lives bad for ordinary people. Does that sound familiar? We keep reliving the same problem in this country because we don't learn. That's the issue.
I was also interested in how much of the campaign, or whether the campaigners are looking back at history in terms of campaigning, and how much of that, things that people have learned over the years, has been used in the campaigns. So, I mean, even if you look at like Greenham Common, you've got them defending or, you know, sort of decorating fences and blocking gates and trying to gain access and things. So do you have any views on how much it's...
Well, I think it actually, for us, I mean, the weird thing about catching up with people who've done this for a lot longer than I have is we accidentally bump into the same things to do. And certainly with the ribbon tying, we started tying ribbons partly for sanity. It's something to do at the side of the road when you're not scrobbling with police. And also because it's very ugly and heartbreaking to walk up every day. It's like our living room up there, you know, 450 days, you straighten ribbons on lampposts on your way up as if you're walking through the hall, you know, and you get to the gates and there it is every morning. It's just there. This monstrosity that you've been fighting for 7 years. And although they're 9 months behind schedule, thanks to the actions of Reclaim the Power and other groups who've come and helped us, you know, we've kept them well behind schedule just by, you know, some of the big stuff, but also just being a nuisance on a daily basis, you know, and muddling about and slowing everything down. And so then we started tying ribbons, and there was a lovely couple. And again, it's that inclusion into activism. You know, there's a couple, and they're older, and they can't be at the roadside because she's unwell. But their living room is like a sweatshop. You know, he pulls the ribbon, and she stretches them off him, and then they deliver them to the roadside. And we started tying them. And we realised, looking across, it's like I looked at the Australian campaign the other day, and I realised some of the phraseology they were using is stuff we were using, but we hadn't talked about that. And it just, there's something that happens by osmosis. There must be some natural human behaviour, and I think the art particularly, and the song and dance is what is a natural reaction to the ugly, brutal reality of what we're facing with the police and the ugly sight, and then all of a sudden you just burst into doing something beautiful or different. And so I now, when I look at other activist movements through history, I recognise us. I mean, there's been a lot about the suffragettes lately, and I look at it and I see in their faces, and I know, like, when we lay out a tabard at night, ready for an action the next day, that somewhere in history someone laid a sash, and they felt like that. And I remember commenting that quite often with my sister when we're going to go and do something, I worry in case it's one of those awful things where the police pull you and all your top comes apart, and you're all undignified. So I remember saying to her before an action, must wear joined up underwear. And then wondering, did people throughout history discuss what underwear they would wear in case they were caught in a compromising position? But there is that humour of knowing that you could go back in time, and that what we feel and all the bonds we found and the humour we found will have been there at every point in history, because it wasn't what the news told you or the history book said. It's the human relationships within activism that make it what it is and the power that it is, I think. Yeah, you can't squash the love and growth in this. Yeah, you can keep on pulling people's hair out, but we're still going to keep on coming back.
There's another question over here.
If it's all right, I was just going to add to that, I mean, Reclaim the Power, it was originally inspired by the kind of roads protest movements of the 90s and born out of the climate camp movement in the UK. But I think for me personally, and for a lot of people in Reclaim the Power, this summer we've kind of learnt more about different ways of doing activism and campaigning than previously, because of being so embedded within that community space, not only with local residents but within protection camp environments. And aside from having to figure out how to get arm tubes up to the same space every day when you know there's going to be 80 police there, it's like, just each person that was there is driven by an individual passion or issue or something that they care about. The thing about fracking is that it's so awful in so many ways that everyone's got a reason to be annoyed about it, and in some ways that makes it a really powerful issue. And because of that, because everyone was coming with their own sense of intention and purpose and their own ideas and their own background, and you know, there were grandmas and activists and people from anti-nuclear groups, people dressed as Where's Wally, all coming into the same space for different reasons. And because of that, it was one of the biggest learning experiences I've had in terms of how to do activism and how to do it collaboratively. And that's such a powerful thing, because across kind of activist movements in the UK, people are often driven by sort of single issues. And it's by doing that sort of movement building and learning and sharing that means we're more powerful together, because we can see how all of our issues intersect and how we're going to be able to work together more collaboratively in the future to achieve fairness, not only in terms of fossil fuel extraction, but all the wider things that affect our society and how we can make those better together.
Uh-huh. So is there another question?
Yeah, hi, my name's Robbie from Reclaim the Power. Actually wanted to pick up on the points you made, Anna, about what the future could hold for the anti-fracking community, because whilst when you're at the front line it's really tough, and we're like fighting it every step and every truck and every planning application, it does, I've said this very tentatively, very, very tentatively, but it does feel in this moment that we're winning. Mm-hmm. And we should take heart from that and be confident and be looking to the future. To touch on your point, Anna, like, what could we do next? Yeah. What could become of this anti movement? Could become a pro something else movement. It could be a movement for socially owned renewables. It could be a movement that calls for greater community self-determination. It could be so many more things when you've got this like fired up, skilled up, passionate, skilled network of people. But we've still got to stop fracking, for sure. We've got INEOS injuncting us up to the eyeballs and UCOG and everything next. But I just wonder if anyone in the panel has any thoughts about like what could become of us.
What next?
Well, I like the fact at Balcombe and even at Barton Moss, you know, the Repower Balcombe. Like if everywhere they came in to try and drill, we created a community energy project and created our own energy. And Balcombe powers its own energy and the next village. And yeah, that, you know, I think from this movement, the fact that it's brought so many people together, I think that's, you know, would be really impressive if we could pinpoint all those sites and go, boom, community energy, and then we're stepping out of the system even by that. That's, you know, that's what I would really
I think
like
we
to
see fracking as a gateway drug, really,
yeah.
to so much else. You know, I always say that particularly for us, we bring tea and cake and we pipe you into the sheer drop of activism. You know, we get you through the door with something sweet, and then we go, oh yeah, this might affect your health. Oh, and by the way, the government says it's okay to play Russian roulette with your children, because they had the economy and they had the ill health of children and early term birth loss and defects. And they weighed those two things up and they said, doesn't matter. We'll take the chance. And so everybody that came into this just because it was fracking and all those new activists then suddenly went, what? And if you were willing to do that to our children, what else are you willing to do? And not only that, and particularly for people maybe of my generation that should have been paying attention a whole lot sooner, what the hell else have you done? I remember someone saying, but you didn't complain about the earthquakes in the coal mines, in the coal mining era. I didn't know. Had you said, I would have done. But I didn't know, and a lot of us didn't, because it used to be, and it isn't now, that some nice man in a suit came on the news at 10 every night, and he said, it's okay. These are your friends, these are your enemies, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, and the guy in the white coat's telling you that's safe. And we didn't have much else, and we had that conditioning. And then we had the outbreak of the internet, and suddenly what used to take me 6 weeks to research, I can research now in minutes, and I can fine-tune my sources, and I know where to find intellect on the internet. And then I can share it with Anna, and then she can share it further, and then we can inform each other. And suddenly my peers I think because we felt isolated before. You know, I might think watching BBC Question Time, am I the only person in the country who thinks these people are idiots? And I thought that I was the only one. Then along came Twitter and the hashtag BBCQT. And suddenly 10,000 people with me are going, it's an idiot, right? Yeah, I agree, it's an idiot. And you realise you're no longer isolated in your viewpoint. And I'd say Balcombe in particular, I watched it have its own little nervous breakdown. They thought they would fight fracking, and that would be that. And along the way, I remember sitting in the tea rooms at Balcombe, having scones with a nice lady, reading the headline, rampaging activists tear through Sleepy Village. And we're both looking out the window over our scones. Where's the rampaging? And then the cover of The Sun Activists defecate in driveways. I'm like, who pooed in someone's driveway? And then this homeowner came out and went, well, actually, a dog pooed in my driveway, and I found this son photographer there, and I just couldn't stop him. I did say it was dog poo, but, you know, and so then they realise, so it's fracking. You know, your council whizzed this by you because it's his cousin's land. That your MP gave Lord Brown his first job in government, and therefore he doesn't care. And that your media is out and out lying to you. And that the academic institutions were paid to write those reports we're supposed to believe in. So your whole world shatters. And so that's the sheer drop and the gateway drug of fracking. Is it's one symptom that leads back to the root cause, which I would say is our system of government. So yeah, we're screwed. But it's okay, there's all of us.
In 1999, I was part of Seattle, except I was organising the online global virtual anti-Seattle, which legally closed down their web servers so they couldn't issue the final communique. And the WTO got onto my internet provider and said, take us account away. So they gave me a job instead. And that job involved going to Eastern Europe and working with human rights workers and journalists who were living then in the unrevolutionised remains of the Soviet bloc. And it's really weird to be in a room full of people where nobody dare speak in case they gave something away. They'd talk to you privately, but they wouldn't speak in a group. And that's always tempered my work in Britain, having worked with people, and people in Africa, whose lives are really on the line. Around the world, 2 environmental activists are being killed every week. We have it so cushy in this country. But unless we use that freedom to help those other people...
Exactly.
And so we have to make the connections. It's one thing to make the connections in this country, but you have to always work with those developing nation connections, the global port. It doesn't matter. We can do it. They risk their lives if they do. So we always have to have a global perspective, whatever we do. Fracking, it's global. But then again, most other industries are global now. You think Cambridge Analytica just took all our data? They take data on the world. So that's the thing. It's all about connection.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
I was just going to, sorry, Joe, you look like you were wanting to speak at one point. So.
Yeah, I've kind of forgotten what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's because I talk too much, I'm sorry.
You do talk a lot, but that's fine. I'm tired.
But yeah, what I was going to say was, in terms of the what's next question, like, I too genuinely do feel like we are winning the fight against fracking, and that's such an exciting thing, and like everyone should cheer for that, by the way. Yeah, we are. And yeah, and the question about why hasn't fracking been banned, like, I feel like we're closer than ever because the political viability of fracking is so small now, and even the government itself is questioning the financial viability of the companies that, you know, 2 years ago it was really shouting about, and now there's this kind of disconnect between what the government's original plans were, and even the sort of scale of the gas infrastructure plans that they have is being reduced because they themselves can see that it's not working. All the major political parties except the Conservatives now have anti-fracking policies, and that's such an important thing. And I think that, you know, it's totally integral that we continue to like push against fracking, and as has kind of been said, the amazing local people at PNR are organising 3 months of united resistance from April to June, where loads of intersectional groups from around the UK and wider than that are going to come and, again, like, express how the different issues are connected. And I think that thing of connecting all of these issues beyond the drill site and beyond fracking, and talking more about social, economic and environmental justice as combined issues, is the only way that we're really going to move forward. And I think starting to look at not just challenging fracking, but challenging fossil fuel infrastructure in the UK, and also thinking about just transitions, because it's fine to criticise people that work in fossil fuel industries, but if that's part of your heritage and part of what has built your livelihood, it's really unfair to criticise, you know, working class people in communities in Newcastle where their whole family have been brought up working in coal, when it's the government that are failing them to move into a just transition. So not just thinking about criticising those people, but actually, like, how can we empower people to be part of the solutions? And that's why something like Repower Balcombe is so incredible, because it's not just saying no to something, it's saying what is the future that we want to create together. So I would really encourage all of you to go to Preston New Road during those 3 months, because there's going to be so many incredible people there that will completely change your life, and you're going to have an amazing time, and you'll be able to connect with people on so many different issues that aren't just about fracking, and they're about not just thinking about what we don't want, but thinking about the future that we want to create together. Reclaim the Power will be there towards the end of June, and we're going to sort of have a couple of weeks where we'll be targeting the supply chain again, because as we've heard, that's a really important tactic in terms of both things that go into the fracking sites, but also stuff that comes out of it, and thinking about how that, but also we've seen that like just having people in that space is really powerful in terms of just numbers shutting the site, but also in terms of creating those connections and building relationships and ideas and creativity that really do help shift this movement. So please come hang out with us in June. We're going to be there from the Wednesday. Well, we're going to be there a lot more than that, but especially if you're thinking, when shall I come? Come for the last weekend of June. We're going to have an exciting sort of 48-hour non-stop blockade, which we've decided to call Block Around the Clock. So please do come out, hang out with us, dance with us, eat with us, and help stop fracking, but not only that, help us design the future that we want to build together.
I'd like to add just another little plug to that, because Pam Lucas is here, who's put a lot of work into organising a coach to go up to the 100 Women March, and that's leaving from London and Dorking and Brighton. And if you are interested in going that and joining the women up at P&R, if you want to email seprotectors@gmail.com, and we can put you on that coach to head up to P&R.
That's the April the 3rd.
Yes, sorry, the dates,
yeah. I mean, you might be coming up on the 2nd, but certainly the March itself is on April 3rd, and that launches
so we're leaving April the 2nd, and the March is on April the 3rd. Thank you.
We have free camping, 3 meals a day, and all we ask is your body at the gates, 8:30 till 6.
So we've run out of time, but if you enjoyed the film, please do share the link to everyone you know. And if you're after a screening, please do get in touch, and we will try and organise that as quickly as we can.
How do people get in touch with?
Undercurrents.org.
Okay.
Yes, and thank you very much for coming.